Hi, I'm Paul Roberts. This is Conscious Counseling 101. I'm an artist. I've been an artist all my life. What an artist tries to do, if they're successful, is to take what they find in reality and work it and mold it and present it to other people in a way that they might not have seen it otherwise. That's what I'd like to do today with the Bible, the history of mankind as written in the Bible. Now, a lot of people want to dismiss the Bible right away. Just remember this while you're listening to this video. Many people don't want to dismiss it away, and it's affected the world in a dramatic way. And I would ask you to have an open mind and listen to these things because they're actually happening, whether it's because what's said in the Bible is correct and true, or whether because people believe it is. We have a great power as human beings, and we're making these things happen. So we might as well know what we're doing as we're doing it. So today I'm going to squash it down into a very small, very readable and understanding generic description. I'm going to try to leave out everything that I possibly can to get this down into as short a video as possible. My goal is to show you what should lie on the hearts of all people as they go through life, at least as I said a moment ago, to know that it's actually happening whether or not we believe it. I personally then label it as I do believe it because it's happening, and I would rather believe that it's happening because it's real rather than we're manufacturing it. I know people will see it in a different way. It's just great that you're concerned about these things and that you're considering. I'd like to say, though, if you want to feel that you've fully considered, you need to read the Bible at least one time all the way through. You really do, because you shouldn't try to argue it or take little cases and points that you find in various verses and say, hey, this is what I think because of this. I started out doing that a long time ago, and I realized there was way more to it than doing that. And I think what made me realize was reading the Bible several times all the way through, and the New Testament several times, and also the Gospels more than several times, to the point where you can have the meanings and understandings and contexts in your heart, in your mind, every day of your life as things are unfolding for you in front of you. This is why it's so important to do it. And as I said, it's important to do it because these things are actually happening because enough people believe in them, they're perpetuating them. That's not always good. If they get it wrong, they can perpetuate things that are bad for us all. And one of the reasons why I do Conscious Counseling 101 is to point out things that are wrongly shown by the masses and they're negatively affecting us. So this is one of the reasons I'm doing this. Let's start out generically here. According to the Bible, the history of mankind, why things are the way they are, even today, even if you don't believe, even if it's not true, even though I believe it is. In the beginning, no one was there to take an account or witness anything. Looking towards the future, words were written down. The words say they were inspired by God and were God, but they were written down in such a way that they could be fluid and flexible, like the living word. They could have even been symbolic. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to anchor anything down. There was a force or being or natural fabric of the universe that came into existence. Man became there also. The words in the Bible say that man had dominion over all the other things, even though he was locked down on this planet and locked into this body that's fleshly and limited, and with this perspective that's limited. But we don't know how limited it is, but it's limited because we have to have life in order to go on. So the symbology that man did something with woman that came along also that was made as a helpmate is that somehow we failed in the way that we related to the things that we were placed in this place and did something that wasn't the best for us. This was symbolized in the fact that we came to know or consciously became aware of what we were and where we were. But in that knowing, we became very insecure because we knew how fallible we were. We knew how easily we could die and it would be over for our conscious existence in our body. We were not able to do anything that would allow us to have life that goes on, regardless of what we do. And those things are symbolized by the garden and the trees. So what happened is we were not allowed to have those things, and we went on, continued to procreate, and we're not going to talk about how those things all happened in the symbology, but we got to a point where it's written down in the Word that God didn't like what was becoming of us. We weren't doing what was intended. And it's said that God tried to wipe out most people, but tried to save the innocent creations. That was with the flood. Now, you can believe this is symbolic. You can believe it covered the whole world. You can believe it didn't exist. You can believe it just covered a portion of it and wiped out what inhabitants there were as it washed around the world with tides and gravity. You can believe whatever you want to do. That's not important. What's important is man was separated, according to the Bible, from God, and most men succumbed to being less than what God and his intended purpose for that creation was to be. So a few that were acceptable were spared. They went on. Eventually, God wanted to reconnect. So he reconnected through a person and a race and made an agreement with them. But even during that time, God wasn't connected completely. God spoke to a few people, gave guidelines, gave assistance, and brought those people to where they could all be reached. Then at that point, made a promise with those people only, and made a covenant with them that if you do what I ask, you'll receive rich blessing. If you don't, you'll receive curse. So they had all the opportunity, but there was a stumbling block or a thorn in the side that the corrupt man eventually failed that race of people, because what happened was that man, the place they could go, because God wasn't connected with the people completely, where they could all see him and when they could all know what he wanted and what it all meant. God placed a faith-based set of rules in their life. Man distorted the word of what God wanted because only a few were able to go into the chosen place and be unified with God's word, and then came out of that chosen place to give the word to the others. When man lost faith when he was in that position, or failed in his own way to be what he was supposed to be, he transferred all those failures into the others, because the others knew not except what was told to them through that person or priest. And so thus became the race of people blinded in some ways. Not all of them, but some. And it became about the person becoming larger and finding power on this earth in their positions that they could have, instead of just going to God and finding what God wanted and telling the people straight. They began to distort what God wanted. Because this happened over a long period of time, their point of view and how they viewed things became skewed. Finally, somebody came along that pointed the skew out to them. They pointed the skew out. Said, look what's happened here, guys. And when this happened, some people realized that the skew was there. Some people didn't. When they realized the skew was there, they either accepted what was being shown to them now as being of God, but connected through man, by man, or they rejected it. So as we went on further, that man lived a life and went beyond. We don't see him. We only have his teachings and what he left us with. Now we can believe that that is the real thing that God wants us to know and the way we relate, because God is now connected to us. That special place where those old people went to go to convene with God and then share what was told to them, that's been torn down and opened up to us now. Each person has the ability to go there. Now, without using words, I'm trying to be generic here. This means we all have access to God through this person. And when we come together in two or more, that person is with us. And if we keep that person's teachings and commands, we'll know him. And we'll be guided by that person's teachings and commands. And that church that we'll have of being with two or more gathered in his name will be the new unifying factor of what people can now be together with God without anybody in the way other than that person's teachings. And through that, we can come to see, through consciousness, in his living word teachings, what has happened. But when he went away, further people went on and documented and chose, once again, in the same way that the chosen people stumbled, because they could find a way to be in man's eyes the larger rather than in God's eyes what they needed to be. And they claimed the roles of leadership once again in the church and in the world in many ways. And now, once again, we're seeing them fall. Even in the way that the words and the church was laid out in the New Testament, man has taken control and ownership of that over the centuries and guided the ways of all those that would believe and come straight to them rather than straight to Jesus' teachings, and have distorted once again the teachings to the point where they all think they're in the church and following this person that came. But they aren't. But they don't realize it because they've been so vulnerable to what man is saying all this time. This was demonstrated for us in the Old Testament very clearly, and yet people are still doing it today. I submit to you that the reason that this Old Testament exists is to show us what man's nature is, so we can identify it and avoid its ills and harms coming to us now. If we're followers of this person that came and showed us this, we can avoid them. We cannot put our faith in man or what's being said in a formalized church, but we can see what Jesus said, who is the person that established the church, and we can see things clearly with contextual awareness. By doing this, everything that we see and experience every day in all the world can be understood and fathomed by us in a very simplistic way, like a child or a non-scholarly person. And that's the beauty of it. That's why Jesus came to those types of people, so that we can have this that I'm talking about now, summarizing the world and the biblical history in less than 20 minutes. Why is this possible? Because this is what this person did. If you elect to believe in this person and study what he says and what it means in context with what came after and what came before. This is how we can know that we're following Jesus. Forget about the word Christian. Just think about the person that started it all and look closely at what he says and listen to his commands and the context of where he came from and where he's going, and the people that came after. This should show you whether or not you're truly following. If you don't understand every one of his teachings inside and out, what they mean and where they came from, the chances are you're lost and on the broad road, and you're a wolf in sheep's clothing, thinking that you are following, but you're led astray by man and a formalized church that has become corrupted. Now, you can be in the formalized church if these aren't your ways, and if you're following Jesus, and you can find great things there. But if you aren't doing those things, you will stumble because you're not on the rock. Even though you're in the place they call the rock, even though you're under the leadership and guidance of those that say they stand on the rock, you're not. Because the rock is Jesus' teachings in and of itself. This needs to be central. It's not. What's happening now in our society is the same thing that happened in the chosen people Jewish society long ago. Some people, power players, are becoming the big leaders. And we're to believe that they're that way because God shined on them. But then we must realize if that's the case, we cannot believe in Jesus' teachings or espouse them, because Jesus says that the love of money is the root of all evil and not an indication that you're being shined on. Health and happiness and prosperity, as it was to the chosen people in that initial covenant, is no longer. It's a moot point. So if you run after a person that says they can have those things and you run after them, and they tell you the teachings of how you can, what they're doing is they're taking those original words that the chosen people had in their covenant, and they're trying to apply them to you. You're outside that race. You are not those people. They do not apply to you. Now, here's the quandary, and I will say this for myself so that you don't follow what I say, but go and learn this on your own. There are about 5 things in the world that I cannot explain, and one of them is the relationship of the Gentiles to the Jews, to the words of that law that were given to them. No stroke will be taken away or added to. But we're outside. What's our relationship? How are we to be? We know that sexual immorality and things of that nature, we're told not to have those to those people because they would lead to not having the offspring that was promised, and that society would be strong. Well, now we still have all kinds of judgment being inflicted on all of our brothers, and we're still getting all the concepts that they initially talked about in the law and thinking they all apply to us. So I say, one of my top things I don't understand is, how do they relate to us? Who's capable of showing us these things? That's a difficult one, and I can't answer that for you. But my intent is to show you this history of the world and take you up to the level of what my final quandaries are that can be just on one hand, and have you apply all your conscious counseling to these difficult things that I can't answer. I've considered many things, and there are only a few things that I can't answer by what I've shared here in adhering to these beliefs and this understanding of the world. Now, my understanding is much more vast than this, but I wanted to share it in a way that was as boiled down as possible. So I'm going to stop talking now and save any other thoughts for further conversations we might have or further videos that I might do another day. Please consider these things and then research and study on your own and see that what I'm saying is indeed the case. How it all comes together, I can't share with you and I don't know. But we must be aware of these things, whether or not we believe in God, because they're actually happening in our world, and these mindsets are actually affecting the leaders in the world today, the leaders and the church people. Everybody is being affected by these things I'm talking about. So I just choose to believe that they are of God and they are real because of that. But they are real whether you believe in God or not, because they are transpiring, and the history that I just shared with you is what makes them transpire in the way that they are. So once again, if I had any advice for you today, I would say go find out what Jesus' teachings are. Reference the entire Bible to find out what the context are, what they mean, and start to give them a lot more credit than you probably are. And I think if you do that, you'll have a better leg up on understanding what's happening in our world, governing your own life. That's what I do here at Conscious Counseling 101. I share a way that you can use perspective counseling to govern your own life based on the knowledge and understanding of these things. And just live a more rich existence by not being duped, by not succumbing to vices, by not having those that would say otherwise be your leaders, by not putting your faith in mankind, or having your love be in the security that you can find in wealth or the things of this world. But turning your eyes towards what started it all, the one force that came to make sense of it all, that still is making sense of it all, if you choose to look and see the contextual whole. Very important to see the contextual whole, but there's enough indicators to just look. When you fall in love with someone, you probably think they're beautiful and wonderful and they make you feel good, right? That's what you can gain just by looking at first. But then when you come to know that person, you see there's so much more there. That's the contextual whole. Run it first towards your first inkling that anything I'm saying about this person is important. Run towards them. Study, learn, grow. The contextual whole will come to you after you knock on the door and the door is answered and you follow. There, that's about as generic as I can make it. All right, guys, this is Paul Roberts of Conscious Counseling 101. I hope this spoke to you. Please speak back with me and share with me what I could do that would be more able to reach people. If this is anything spoken to you in this, please share what's been effective so that I can continue to work on those things. I'm Paul Roberts, and this is Conscious Counseling 101, trying to consider some of the most important things known to mankind in the most summarized and understandable ways possible.